Hello. Well, I'm glad to meet you,
Hello.
Gayle. Hi.
Hello, Dan. Thank you so much for taking the time for speaking with me today. Um,
Indeed.
your technology, well, you're known as a polymath. You've heard that before, I'm sure. Known for your work with fractal physics, bioarchitecture, biofeedback, a specific more recently in relation to your ideas around gravity and consciousness. Um,
And
and you
my new
are.
book, plunkfire.com. That's the gravity and consciousness. Yes. Charge collapse.
Yeah, your amazing book. And you are the original creator, the developer of the Theraphi technology. And this is what I wanted to talk to you about today. So let's crack on with the questions.
Can I just ask where your beautiful accent comes from?
So London, I grew up here. I grew up in
Oh, I
London.
see. I see. That's a
Yeah.
very, very lovely British accent. I say, hey, what ruddy good show. No,
Well,
I'm
it's not
sorry.
as posh as that, actually, but that's interesting. So where did you think it was from?
Oh, I don't know. I thought it was British or Irish or something. You know, we Americans, we love accents. I'm sorry, but anywho,
But
go ahead.
you live in France now, don't you?
Well, I'm based in Australia. I go back and forth, and we used to go around the
Ah,
world every year, and yeah. Anyway,
but
until I
you
got
said you're on France time.
yes, that's right. I'm in South France right now. Yes,
Ah, okay.
Mhm.
In Perpignan?
Yes, and near there for yes, my late magic lady here. Yes.
Ah, okay. So I'll be coming out there, of course, in September.
Oh,
Um,
wonderful. Yes, our conference sold out. We're having super fun.
I'm not surprised.
Fractaltheater.com/2024 and
Yeah,
amazing guests, fun party. Cool. Well, we'll get to
yeah,
see it. Wonderful.
yeah. I'm really looking forward to that.
Good.
What part of America are you from originally?
Well, I was born just east of Eden at a very early age, and my brother was an only child. No, East Eden, East Eden is in Western New York, and
Okay.
the grapes of wrath were across the street, and that was the winter of our discontent. So we were archetype. Thank you very much. No, and then I went to a Franciscan high school, St. Francis, and educated by the Jesuits, University of Detroit, electrical engineering, then psychophysiology. And then I was a systems analyst trained at IBM, Detroit, Chicago, and Poughkeepsie. And then I ran an electric motor business for 20 years, an inventor, and then started traveling the world teaching. And it's a fun story. Anywho,
Yeah, many different chapters, and here
yeah.
we are. Yeah. Um, so yes, we're going to be talking about the spiritual implications of technology.
Mhm.
I'm going to try and read my questions, by the way, without glasses. So let's see how that works out.
Okay,
Um,
cool.
yeah. So based on the principles of fractal physics and implosion, can you first talk a little bit or explain about the concepts and how they might relate to human consciousness and spiritual experiences such as bliss and enlightenment?
How that fractal physics and implosion relates to
Yes.
consciousness. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Well, the core idea here, and it's absolutely core, and remember, I was studying psychophysiology in 30 years, and I really became a bit upset that it actually appears that conventional physics has no answer to why anything is electrically centripetal.
Mm.
Gravity is centripetal. They don't have a clue why objects fall to the ground. And consciousness, focused human attention, measurably electrically centripetal. Bill Tiller proved it. And why is see things that are fun? An electron, for example, is centripetal. It's a little black hole. But does physics know why anything is centripetal? Oh my God. Is this, I'm sorry, I think they're arrogant for telling us they're teaching us when they don't have a clue why objects fall to the ground. They ain't teachers, in my humble opinion. Anywho, so
Yes.
focusing focusing on the drama of the issue that
Mm.
if physics knew why anything was centripetal, then possibly they could tell you why objects fall to the ground, why consciousness exists, and why life exists, and why negentropy exists. Interestingly, negentropy means self-organization, basically. Your physics teacher was wrong when entropy, chaos. Well, hell no, they made a mistake. It ain't. The universe has a way out of chaos, and that is called charge collapse, fractal implosive conjugate charge collapse. Now, it's interesting that most physicists would already agree that charge collapse causes consciousness and causes gravity. And most physicists would already agree that fractality causes gravity. That's old news. What physics does not happen to know is what causes charge to collapse or implode, and therefore what causes gravity and consciousness. I answered in detail in my newest book, plankfire.com, P-L-A-N-C-K, Plankfire, P-L-A-N-C-K-P-H-I-R-E, plankfire.com. So basically, you take the dimension of Planck, the musical key signature of every wave physics has ever measured, and you multiply by whole number powers of golden ratio called fractality perfected. And that's an equation, Planck times integer exponents of golden mean ratio, fractality perfected. And you get the 3 radii exactly of hydrogen, Earth year, Venus year, galactic year, precessional year, Schumann harmonics, the brainwave harmonics, the sacrocranial harmonics, and 200 other incredibly important physical variables. Read plankfire.com. So every time nature, for example, the exact 2 wavelengths that make photosynthesis work, photosynthesis exists because of charge collapse. It is fundamental. And it turns out that consciousness exists because of, I mean, consciousness is a name for a plasma vortex inside your head, the synaptic array, and you inhabit that array with a vortex, and you can take that with you when you lucid dream and when you die if you get coherent. Anywho, so yes, fractal implosive charge collapse is absolutely fundamental. If anybody wants to know why a seed germinates, what makes a building alive, what makes consciousness exist, and what makes gravity exist. So implosive charge collapse is fundamental. Now, I'm carrying on, but let me just give me 30 more seconds here, if you will.
Yeah.
So implosive charge collapse tunes to Planck. Why? So physics says that the Planck length and time is the same for 1 billion light years in all directions, and they think it's because of the Big Bang, but they're wrong, actually. The Planck length, it's at the center of that pine cone where the pine cone spits out gravity waves. This is the pine cone's caduceus. At the center of that caduceus, when the wave gets down to the length of Planck, that implosion begins to distribute that energy of the electric field of that wave, which was a transverse wave going up and down. And at the squirt gun tip of that pine cone vortex called caduceus, called phase conjugation, that wave is converted from transverse to longitudinal, sometimes called scalar or compressional. And then it enters into an array, which it bounces at the nearby nodes, which makes that wave shareable. Otherwise, that wave would get canceled. So every wave for 1 billion light years in all directions has to bounce at the wave nodes based on Planck and golden ratio, or it dies. That's why the universe for 1 billion light years in all directions agreed on Planck, because it's a wave distribution that any other wave, they're toast. And so that longitudinal wave then becomes an introduction to the absolute measurable, testable, documented physics of what is a soul, what is clairvoyance, what is lucid dreaming, what you take with you through death, and what is ancestor memory. You can begin to know that in physics by measurement once you understand how a longitudinal wave propagates, for example, Aboriginal songlines. So there, I carried on and got excited, but did I answer? Maybe.
I think you did, and I think you probably answered all of my questions in one answer, but you know, it needs some unpacking.
Yes, it
Now,
needs
that
more.
is your passion and your knowledge is so exciting to watch. It's so awe-inspiring and joyful, actually. There's an energy that comes from you, which is joyful, incidentally.
Blissful, absolutely.
Blissful. And we'll also come back to that.
Because it's fun. Everything else is boring.
And it's really fun to listen to. And I really, you know, one of the intentions behind putting together this series is to really spread these kind of ideas and concepts, even if we can try and manage to get them down into bite-sized, understandable layman's terms. I'm sure this will happen the more this is spoken about. It'll just kind of penetrate and integrate. But I'm really interested in your journey with this development. You know, what were the trigger moments, the sort of light bulb moments for you, if you like, along your journey? And you met with criticism from the scientific community. Who inspired this development in you? What's the journey there?
Yeah, thank you for asking about the journey, and I'd love to answer. But I just want to comment one thing. You know, I have taught this new physics to thousands of audiences, and hundreds of them were scientists. And you know what? I have never, ever had any serious scientists say one word to say I was wrong about anything. Not one word. Because I mean, you look at that, when you look at that equation, Planck multiplied by golden ratio is 3 exquisitely precise hydrogen radii. Hydrogen is fractal. I proved it. And that's how and why hydrogen makes gravity. That is a smoking gun, and ain't no physicist anywhere even burped when I told them, oh, that's how hydrogen makes gravity. No, that is absolutely incontrovertible. It is a smoking gun. And not only that, Professor Raymond Chow now measures velocities faster than light are very close to golden ratio times the speed of light. That's what gravity waves are, longitudinal, which is what Tom Bearden proved. Anywho, but your question was the light bulb moments.
Yeah,
well,
the journey. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, in terms of the hydrogen equation, there were equations in the literature showing that golden ratio is all over the geometry of hydrogen. That's actually old news. But then to discover that golden ratio is the radii to center of hydrogen. They knew that the radii had golden ratio between them, but they didn't know that the distance to center was golden ratio times Planck. That was new information. So that was a light bulb moment. Another light bulb moment was when probably 25 years ago, when my friend, Professor Korotkov, GDV in Russia, we worked together for years. He was documenting the World Without Blindness projects for kids in Russia, St. Petersburg. And he documented that the turning point when kids start seeing without their eyes is when they get golden ratio in their brainwaves. I mean, that is an absolute light bulb moment. Oh, your brainwave harmonic tensors are like fingers on the liquid crystal vortex called consciousness inside your head. And when those harmonics in your brainwaves, alpha to gamma, are golden ratio, they squeeze the vortex to implode. And by the way, at that moment, not only do those kids start seeing without their eyes, they often get clairvoyant and they start seeing their dead grandmothers, and their parents freak out. So golden ratio and brainwaves, that was the beginning of flameinmind.com. That was a lightning. There are many lightning bolts when we tripped over the physics behind Antoine Priory and I invented the Theraphi. Many light bulb moments.
Yes.
Actually, I want to tell one more light bulb moment. There I am, a graduate, a rather relatively shy, or at least articulate but shy, electrical engineer graduate student at the University of Detroit Psychophysiology Lab. And I noticed that if you show pictures of Playboy magazines to young college males and you watch the electrical resistance between their fingers, the switch is faster than any transistor.
Right. Right.
And guess what?
Okay.
The electrical resistance goes down.
It goes down. Yes.
Like, touch me, please.
Yeah. Well, you're touching on, excuse the pun, touching, but the fundamental impulses for mating or reproduction, I guess. That's why.
Well, they call it GSR, galvanic skin resistance, but actually it's very simple. Your permission to touch. So the point is that I suddenly see the electrical relationship between, the inner urges and the fact that emotion. So then I knew, well, Albert Axe was my teacher who invented biofeedback, really, with Elmer Green, whom I also knew. But then I knew Manfred Klein's Centix, goldenmean.info/touch, who then measured the change in pressure over time 1,000,000 times when you squeeze someone, say, I'm joy, versus if you squeeze someone to say, I love you, and you measure the geometry of pressure over time of that squeeze, for example, the perfect birth canal, the moment of maximum pressure in the squeeze that says, I love you, is 0.618 tantrically delayed into the duration of that hug, meaning implosive. So yeah, actually there's many light bulb moments, but I had some fun.
Can I just take you back to when were you talking about the teaching the blind kids to see, or the blind kids finding themselves able to see with the liquid crystal vortex? Are you talking about what's in the pineal gland, specifically the crystallization in the pineal gland?
Actually, that bodes on the question of the physics of Kundalini. We have a new documentary, goldenmean.info/Kundalini. Basically, the golden ratio in brainwave harmonics, a cascade of frequencies from alpha to gamma, which are literally the Schumann harmonics that triggers bliss and seeing without eyes and all the fun stuff. which we teach at flameandmind.com, our EEG invention. That cascade allows the brainwave signature to initiate broad spectral compression, implosion, where you get a hold on the tornado liquid crystal vortex inside the synaptic array. You know, you inhabit an array now, it's your synapses. When you die, you need to learn to inhabit a bigger array. It's called the longitudinal nodes, otherwise known as dreaming tracks or collective unconscious. And the way you get from the little array to the big array is called embedding. And this is the physics of lucid dreaming, which tells you if you have a soul, and it's electrically measurable. But anyway, in the physics of Kundalini, what's happening is the low frequencies of the spine liquid pump, sacrocranial, and if your spine liquid is pumping, it is clinically impossible to be depressed. That's up Ledger in Florida. So when those harmonics phase lock, they're called the tidals. And guess what? They're golden ratio times Planck. Golden mean not emphasize Kundalini. So the spine liquid pump is literally a snake that's charmed, and it pumps a phonon wave that then circulates in the brain liquids. And that phonon wave then implodes upon the ventricle liquids horns, which crystallize, called getting horny, which is actually a conservation of sexual juices. And the phonon wave implodes on the pineal, which is not only a crystalline, but it's a fabulously super dielectric. And it actually burns and ignites. And there's this implosive vortex, and you can feel a negative ion wind. It's all in the physics of Kundalini section. But it is the climax form of bliss. It's fabulous. It's acceleration of consciousness, and it can be life-threatening.
Right. Okay. Well, it seems funny to end a question there, but I want to bring this all back to, I mean, I'm picking up on a theme, being someone that is outside any kind of academic study on electrical engineering or physics. I pick up on the theme, again, that kind of toroidal force, the kind of vortexal structure, yes, infinitely imploding, infinitely turning, mechanism happening. And how does that relate to, when I think of the structure of Theraphi, it is like a cone. Does it create that kind of vortices inside it then? And that, kind of, saying this in very simplistic terms, that's creating, that contraption is creating a field with its phase conjugation. It's creating a field that envelops the person that is receiving a treatment. Am I right?
Yes. Yes. And to use slightly more electrical engineering terms, so inside the two Pyrex plasma tubes, which are cone-shaped, the noble gas is triggered with a 500,000 volt RF field, igniting the plasma, and that's called optical phase conjugation in the noble gases. Now, if the frequency of the optical phase conjugation is in phase with the 500,000 volt radio frequency field we're dumping from the bifiller Tesla coil,
right,
and that is in phase with about 16 infrasound harmonics from PlanckFire.com, the low frequency, the Schumann cascade being one part of that cascade. And so you modulate the optical with the radio frequency with the infrasound, and that cascade is all locked into phase, one big caduceus pine cone. So not only are the pine cones kissing noses, but big pine cones are kissing noses. So at the sweet spot where the two opposing fields, just like opposing lasers phase conjugate to make negentropy and time reversal. So at the sweet spot exactly between, you have a field where you kind of feel a tingle and a presence. It will accelerate metabolism. 30% of people get some bliss or euphoria. 30% of people get some sharpening of vision. We know what causes vision, that implosion. And so that is profoundly negentropic. So we can deal with pain, localized pain, usually, almost first time, and long-term and chronic pain after, some treatments. We're able to help many. We don't make medical claims. But there's an issue there with Theraphi is, almost $30,000. Oh my God. And that's why we have developed much cheaper, but almost amazingly equally powerful now, Piezophire.com. We use the piezo speakers and super dielectric shungites, and we can make that beautiful tingling radiance field. Actually, Russ here just had amazing art opening experience. So we can do this much cheaper now. It's wonderful.
Yeah, that's amazing. So really what I find is that my exploring technologies such as this, spiritual tech, as I like to call it, helps me grasp basic electrical concepts, basic physics, basic fractal physics concepts. And it gives people like me an opportunity to understand consciousness outside of the usual metaphysical understandings or texts or readings about what consciousness is. And I feel it enables people to understand consciousness in a more scientific framework, even though it is, I would call it this new physics. Do you see that is the same thing, Dan? Do you see that's helping people to understand consciousness from a different way, from a more scientific viewpoint? I mean, I think it's needed to have that kind of bridge between science and spirituality to convert the non-believers that there is such a thing as consciousness that can be
we need a way
developed.
to teach the kids what a soul is, basically, which is the same thing. So, but if for example, if you look at the perfect caduceus here, which is the geometry of the spine liquid pump harmonics, and that caduceus is called conjugation. If you revolve that, you get the Grail cup. Now, I have the animations ready, but people want, our 300 slideshow on all this. Fractalfield.com/slideshow, and you'll have the 300 animated. It's all there ready for you. But the point being that if people can visualize that caduceus, and then you revolve that in a circle and you literally make the Holy Grail and it revolves and it's wonderful. goldenmean.info/grail. You see the animations. The point is, suddenly it's breathtaking. You see what fractality is, what enables perfect compression. This is the lesson here that, remember, almost every single problem in the history of science, what causes gravity, what causes alchemy, what causes negentropy, what causes successful urban design, what is the history of computing, every single great problem of history, the solution is successful compression. In every case, actually, successful compression. And by the way, literally, electrically, measurably, what is the way through death? I will inform you from my study in depth. That answer is successful compression. It's literally an electrical black hole. We know what you see during death. Heinrich flew waveform constants. See the graphics. goldenmean.info/immortality. Point being that, yes, this is a study of successful compression. And by the way, when you implode at death, or the same as before you have bliss or before you have lucid dream, it's the same physics. So the shape of the wave of anger cannot compress well. It's 1/7, right, actually, in physics. And so you can't take that with you. Sorry. The only thing that goes through death is a shareable wave. So why is the physics of pure intention the actual physics of successful death? How do you get shareable? That perfect wave distribution is called Hey Ave, heaven. I mean, it's a wonderful study. So yes, we need ways to teach the kids this, and that's what we're doing.
So imagine I'm a kid. I don't know any scientific terms. I don't anyway. So I am a kid.
Good.
What is Theraphi doing? Try to tell me without any of the scientific terms. In a nutshell, what is it doing?
It's doing the same thing a good cathedral design would do. When you get to the center point, you feel that electrical, icy stillness of potential bliss, and you close your eyes and you feel the field effect of your conscious unpack like a rose, and you're literally inhabiting a larger and larger field. Well, any precisely centripetal broad spectrum electrical field, call it a cathedral, call it Theraphi, it doesn't matter, actually. It's literally the definition of sacred space, which is implosion, very measurable if you know the physics of biologic architecture, bioarchitects.net. So we take a rose electrically and we make a space, and we can do it in architecture, absolutely. We can make a space that causes a seed to grow.
With the machine, with Theraphi?
You could do it with Theraphi, and we do regularly. People buy them, $30,000 to make seeds grow regularly. Actually, we make seeds grow, absolutely. However, there are cheaper ways to do this. The physics is you design an electric field that looks like a rose. So the point is that you create a centripetal field. Now, here's what it should mean for the kids. This is my passion right now. Physicsofsoul.com. Look, the kids got these Bluetooth and Wi-Fi gizmos in their ear, and it is literally electrically destroying their soul. Billions of kids' soul is being destroyed now because your government doesn't know what a soul is. This is a tragedy. The reason that Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, electrosmog crap and metal buildings and dead air is destroying the soul of the kids is because those frequencies are the opposite of a rose. They don't implode well. And you literally can't think. So for example, you remove the sinful fluorescent light crap from your kid's classroom, you install sunlight, you measure a dramatic increase in attention span. If you know what attention span is, you would immediately, urgently get this goddamn Bluetooth electrosmog Wi-Fi out of your kid's classroom. And then you'd put them in biologic materials so their aura could grow. That's what kids need to know. What is a soul? And it ain't going to be found in any damn metal machine or computer. Hell no.
So this is why it's important that we learn how to understand consciousness, and governments learn how to understand consciousness from a scientific perspective.
Absolutely.
Physics
That's
perspective.
my point. Yes.
Yeah. So the more people that understand what a soul is from this perspective, the more we can affect change in society.
20 documentaries with the physicsofsoul.com.
Wonderful. Okay, so moving on slightly to, well, not really moving on. I have seen that creating a phase conjugate environment optimally affects DNA, that you can get DNA communication, which helps the biofield, health and well-being. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, it kind of started when I taught Art Math Institute, Roland McCready, how to take his first EKG. And then I taught him how to spectrum analyze an EKG. And then I tried to teach him what heart coherence was and failed. But then I predicted that same heart coherence, I showed them how to measure when I invented the word heart coherence at realheartcoherence.com. Glenn Ryan took up my challenge and then measured the fact that at the moment when your heart sings like a laser, the harmonics become coherent. I invented the measurement process, second order spectrum analysis called Cepstrum. So your heart sings like a laser, and guess what happens? And by the way, it's literally a functional lie detector. Works great, actually. So because your heart can't sing like a laser unless you're speaking your truth. It's very measurable. It's a functional kinesiology measurement. So when your heart sings like a laser, that heart coherence onset, Glenn Ryan then replicably measured that the enzyme associated with the braid density, the zipper of the density of the braiding
of the double helix,
the thread braids to string, the string braids to rope, the rope braids a very fat rope. It's a series of phonon harmonic cascades, internally phase coherent, that triggers electrically measurably the braiding, implosion, centripetal force, ensoulment in DNA, okay? You can see all the pictures, graphics is beautiful. goldenmean.info/DNA manifesto, when I have the slides, whatever. But that is a very simple, and the brainwave harmonics and the EKG harmonics both do the same thing. Interestingly, the EKG harmonics are an octave-based cascade, and the brainwave harmonics are golden ratio-based cascade, and you need both, actually.
So your technology repairs DNA?
Well, we can measure and document what phonon harmonic series can measurably trigger recursive implosion braiding in DNA. And that is, for example, not just Theraphi.net, but much cheaper, flameinmind.com, the brainwave tech, and the Flame in Sound app, which excludes the brainwave part. It's cheap. And we make the world's most powerful bliss-inducing binaural cascade. Stick in your headphones, implode the phonons inside your head. I mean, like $20. And we use the same cascade to drive Theraphi, Quantify, Plasmafire, Piezophire, 5-vibes. They're all driven by the exact same, because now that we know what perfect phonon implosion is, we can trigger that. And whether you want a seed to grow or your DNA to implode in bliss, it's the same electric field. It's that implosive series of harmonics, which look like a caduceus.
Yes. Amazing. What about things like inflammation, reducing inflammation or pain or wounds, wound healing, things like that?
The simple electric principle is, and which is a good place to start on the question of pain, is that pain is electrically defined by fractality, which is broken, and charge, which is bleeding due to the broken fractal, literally. So any medical person will tell you that compression is the opposite of pain. Something hurts, you squeeze it. Well, actually, if you make an electric field to squeeze it, and if that electric field happens to be implosive, which we know is negentropic, so that's the theory. In practice, our technologies now, especially Piezophire.com, which does it much cheaper. We had multiple people with serious hernia pain, and in one session, I mean, you just focus that implosive capacitance right on the hernia. It's amazing. So for localized pain, we are I'm not making medical claims. I'm just saying anecdotal reports are amazing for localized pain. So now that we know what pain is, hello, a broken fractal.
Yes.
So, and for inflammation reduction, it's a similar principle. You add centrifuge. And, the infrared studies on reduced inflammation are in the blog at theraphi.net.
I mean, probably to you, it seems like you're answering all of my questions with the same science. I understand that really it's the same answer, the same science, the same theory that is applied to most of the questions I'm going to ask you today. And it's just simply amazing and mind-boggling. And I'm, wrapping my head around this. There are many terms for someone to wrap their head around in something like this. Now, we've spoken about this phase conjugation and this implosion happening and creating a well-being conducive, a health beneficial field around the human body. And I've read that this can be likened, you're essentially able to produce with this technology what can be likened to the Buddhist rainbow light body, the bar from the car, the soul body. You've mentioned this already, but can you tell me, can you tell me a little bit about that? The likening to where you hear in ancient texts and seeing ancient civilizations, the pictures depicting these kinds of things. And incidentally, there is an engraving, isn't there, of a kind of Theraphi-like structure. I think this is in Egypt, in the hieroglyphs, right?
Pyramid light bulb, the pyramid light bulb, and it has a caduceus in it, and it looks exactly like a Theraphi tube. When the Theraphi tube turns on, it looks just like the carving of the pyramid light bulb.
Right. Well, so this is a theory that has been carried through. Clearly, it has been embraced and held with importance in the past, in ancient civilizations and knowledge.
The Sumerians said, oh, we arrived, Anunnaki, here, and we catastrophically started aging faster. Oh, merd. And so they said, we will need to build a Shem unto the Lord, which in the Bible they mistranslated. They called it altar in the church. Actually, that's bullshit. The Shem is an implosion field that reverses aging. That's what the altar was electrically. It's what the Ark of the Covenant was. That's what a Shem unto the Lord. So they needed to build a fractal field to reverse aging. And then they documented how they reversed aging. And that's what the Shem, the altar in the church, the design was for. And by the way, pyramids well designed, the Hummer, pyramidwirelesspower.com, reverse aging also. So that negentropic field actually was a little electric black hole, an implosive capacitor. Ark of the Covenant is an example. So let's just step forward a little bit in time. So my friend Gary Skillen, he was fabulous in Canada, and he would say, well, don't tell me who's sick in this house. He would go in and make a magnetic map of everyone's bed, and then he would inform you who was sick. And actually, the result was, what you need to do is make a magnetic map of your bed, and then your house and backyard, and then your village, and then rearrange all those magnetic maps to look like a rose, and then you're done. Now, when we got to Prague, the magnetic map of Prague is literally a rose, goldinmean.info/Bohemia. It's because it's the meteoritic caldera, and the meteorite was alchemic. It's the same. And the Moldavite on Prague makes alchemy for that reason. So I lucid dreamed. I could, my clairvoyance, my clairaudience worked better. Talk to Valerie's ancestors in Prague. So the physics is you restore centripetal forces to create the negentropy and charge distribution enabled, sometimes called heaven. So, or plains of Charon, or Champs-Élysées, illusion fields. So the physics here is that restored charge distribution efficiency, and that's why Gurdjieff School, Charlestown, West Virginia, Claymont.org, Gurdjieff, Meetings with Remarkable Men, and Beelzebub's Tales to his grandson. Gurdjieff is assuring us that if we can't make what he called a Kesjan body, we ain't never going to get immortal. And there I am, and electrical engineering says, what the hell does he mean by Kesjan body? Just like what Tibetans say, rainbow light body, and the Egyptians called it Ba from the Ka. But now we know exactly what that is. When there's that implosive squeezing in DNA braid and on the glands, the body converts the transverse EMF component into coherent longitudinal or scalar EMF field. And that's literally how you measure and trigger the beginning of lucid dreaming. It's how you measure and trigger the beginning of clairvoyance. It's how you measure and trigger what the Aboriginals called songline ancestor memory, their only name for God. So getting that longitudinal coherence in your aura, measurably electrically triggering lucid dreaming. We know the frequencies. It's documented in university literature. It's implosive. So absolutely we know what a soul is. It's coherent longitudinal EMF emission when you squeeze the pine cone accurately. And you can do that in a forest in the woods. But if you're sitting in a goddamn steel and aluminum metal building in a city with Wi-Fi and electrosmog all over the damn place and pollution, oh shit, no, those kids ain't going to have no soul, and it's a tragedy. Okay, there's my 2 cents. I'm done now.
Well, that's funny, because I was just about to ask you, what's the opposite of that? I mean, buildings with electrosmog and lots of metal in them. Have you ever come across any geographical places in the world, aside from the pyramids? I know we spoke about the pyramids and the Ark, that have that natural capability to produce that kind of field?
They're all over. When I woke up in the sarcophagus in the king's chamber, and the lights went out, man, and there was that electric gold and my Kundalini. It's a story, but I'll tell you, near here, there's a place called St. Martin's de Canigou, and there's also Saint Michel de Quicha. The magnetic line, which is called the Pilgrimage of Compostelle. Compostelle means the electric field of stars. So, for example, at St. Martin de Canigou, in the basement, under that incredible top of the mountain, fabulous, you go down there and you close your eyes, man.
Really?
Electric lightning flashes. And I mean, if your aura doesn't unpack there, you ain't gonna unpack. So yes, absolutely, we know what that is. We know how to build it. Once you know what sacred space is, it's real and it's everything. And that's, by the way, the nodes on the planet look like this for that.
That's true. What about in Jerusalem? What about Temple Mount, for example, or Sedona, or
the Orion Wars were over the Stargate. That's how Anu got tricked into marrying the Draco that made Enlil Yahweh, because of the vortex in Orion, the biggest Stargate. In Jerusalem, the war is always over the Stargate. That's what I'm saying. Uru Asa LM, the original term Jerusalem. Uru means Draco, or it means portal. Asa, queen of, El, place of the phase shift. Those who can make the El, Elohim, which actually is the phase shift from transverse to longitudinal. So if you can make, and so Jerusalem was the Stargate portal, and of course, that's where the war between Enki and Enlil was centered, because Enlil ran North Africa and Enki ran South Africa. It's an old story, but so Jerusalem is a name for a broken Stargate. So I'm suggesting cancel. That's my humble suggestion.
You're suggesting cancel. Sorry, I missed that. Cancel.
Cancel the war, please, because the
Oh, yes. Yes.
Stargate is broken. So
Yeah.
why bother fighting? No,
Yes.
in other words, teach the kids to get immortal. That's what's worth fighting for. And stop fighting for the old Stargate that Enlil, the Yahweh, the Draco invented.
Yes. Okay, so tell me about Theraphi and Stargates, Theraphi and portals.
Well, if you take the power spectrum of the brainwave that we teach for kids seeing without their eyes and Bliss, flameinmind.com, and we did that then subsequently for Jean-Charles Moyen, wonderfully, and I do lectures with Elena and Jean-Charles. And he really worked at it and measured the brainwave, alpha to gamma cascade, just before he replicably teleported with witnesses multiple times, came back with sand between his toes. This is one of his little talents.
When was this?
Well, I did an international lecture on this in Tours with Elena Dedon a year ago, and I do a lot. But it's all the measurements are at flameinmind.com/lucid brain. You can see the measurements. It's the same frequencies that kids make when they see without their eyes, except the amplitude of coherence of the alpha to gamma cascade was off the charts, man. Got to turn the gain down because the brain is making this harmonic cascade super powerfully. And yes, what you're doing is creating this implosion point in the plasma where the transverse can convert to the longitudinal and embed in the array. That's called portal. That is an introduction to the physics of Stargate, and it's all fame and okay. I mean, that's a long story, but that's an intro.
Yeah, but the my question here is the amplification is directly related to the broadening of consciousness. So the bigger the amplification, bigger the broadening, the bigger the bandwidth.
There's two issues here. One is the amplitude of the coherence, and the other is the spectral bandwidth. So the harmonic inclusiveness of that caduceus, like when you use the infrasound and then the RF frequencies and then the optical in Theraphi. So Stargates, to put it this way, when you want to make lasers phase conjugate and measure time reversal as physics commonly does, they must approach in perfect cubic four-wave mixing. If you look at the largest Stargate in our galaxy, the trapezium in Orion, it is absolutely a cube. And so you have massive broad spectral conjugation and getting leverage at the longitudinal node at the center. And the Orion Wars started there. All the wars start over the Stargate. You got to know what a portal is. And so recently, thanks to the Galactic Federation, the Nebu really got kicked out of there, the Greys. So, you know, the galaxy is improving quickly.
So your Theraphi can induce states of broader consciousness, amplification of the consciousness field, strengthening of the aura, strengthening of health and well-being, induce one's ability to tap into the array, the meridian lines of consciousness, being beneficial, helping telepathy, bilocation, astral projection, channeling.
Helping yoga, helping tantra, helping meditation. And we have at least 5 major product lines that all do that rather powerfully. Piezophire.com, amazing. We just had a heart opening right here today with it. So yes, the physics is clear. If you induce the more broad spectral the implosion, the bigger the caduceus, the bigger the pine cone, the more radiance results. So the implosion's density predicts the amount of radiance. And that, I'm not saying you need a machine to do that, but it's helpful to understand the physics. And yes, we have at least 5 machines that do absolutely and are commonly. In fact, our major international lecture this Sunday, fractalu.com, is the Paraguay-Uruguay Theraphi Center group specializing in breath and yoga and bliss meditation using Theraphi for groups. Okay, that's this Sunday's lecture, fractalu.com. So yes, absolutely these fields, but I'm saying, there are much cheaper ways to do that. One way is to make an altar in your house.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
We can do it with phonon, piezophire. There's lots of ways to do this, but it is very helpful to learn the physics, which becomes a hygiene and a practice.
Have you ever heard of any cases where this has been used in birth and death transitions?
We had the wonderful, it was the Iboga Center for Addiction in Africa that used the Theraphi for birth.
Yeah.
And the lady there reported dramatic success in relaxation. And, birth should absolutely be blissful. And she was blissful and very happy. But I'm not saying that the Theraphi should always be used for birth. There are complicated issues here because it will accelerate somewhat metabolism and it will accelerate mentation. It's great for waking up and not great for sleeping. But no, there's documented evidence. So basically, we can facilitate the relaxation, absolutely, and the reduction of inflammation. So it has been very helpful. And as far as death is concerned, we have documented, as many, that successful death is absolutely an electrical black hole, for sure. The sequence of visions you see prove that. You see your whole life pass in a compression moment. It's called Heinrich Kluge form constants, the geometry of successful death, golden mean.info/immortality. So it is obvious that successful death should absolutely be planned with access to electrical compression. That means the altar at Machu Picchu would be good. Most hospitals are literally hell because of the metal and electrosmogs. Your aura ain't going to compress well. So planning for successful death is accessing to charge implosion. There's also astrological, if the moon is in the way, you can't unpack your aura because it's opposite to dielectric. That's why if the moon is in the way, you cannot germinate a seed, actually, because eclipses block the longitudinal of the sun and therefore the compression effect. So the physics of planning for successful death and birth is absolutely about finding both the time and place of successful compression, for sure.
Yes. I mean, this is deviating from the subject matter a little bit, but I wonder what happens then if you were to die on an eclipse like the one we just had, or a full moon. Is it less likely to have a successful death?
The reason ghosts and plasma parasites go crazy during eclipses and even full moon is because the moon, being hollow and metal, is the opposite to high dielectric. And so when the moon blocks the sun, like you can put a sheet of copper on the roof and a wire to the basement, and your plants will grow fine in the pitch black because it gets the longitudinal of the sun. But if the moon were in the way, hell no. And so you can change the geometry of your sacred dolmen stone geomantic plumbing during the eclipse, but generally the eclipse is a time to hold that space. And so it would be a lousy time for birth and death, actually. So the alignments basically are, and that is the real physics of astrology, which few have considered, is the compression into the longitudinal array. There is a real astrology. My view is the way it's practiced on this planet is 99% crap. But as an electrical engineer, I can tell you it's real, that the gravitational array is a longitudinal array and it's measurable, and it should be taught purely as physics, actually. Embeddability into that array. But then you could predict, yes, the geometry of Venus and Earth is a pentagram, and here's why: implosion. If you're part of that implosion, Venus is called the return of Christ Osiris, and there's good physics. So there is a physics to astrology.
Yes. Okay, that brings me nicely onto the next question about the overlap with sacred geometry, symbols, things such as the Star of David, the Flower of Life, the significance on our consciousness, the significance of having these symbols, and any overlap. I mean, it's probably obvious to you, but the overlap with the technology that's used in the Theraphi.
My original world tours were sponsored by Drinvalo, Ron Holt, and Flower of Life people. And they were teaching people to visualize a tetracube, which the shadow is the Star of David, and it's a cube. And so they were essentially visualizing a cube around their body, which, if you understand the physics here, a cube creates only octave-based wave ratio, which is perfect for crystallize and stabilizing, and absolutely useless for implosion. You will have no centripetal force, absolutely none, but you will have a very stable crystal. Unfortunately, what we learned was if you visualize only the tetracube, your body becomes this big hex crystal. You know, I will put a hex on you. And if you don't do the climax, which is you go from hex to pent. You know, Drunvalo always taught the last step is dangerous and secret. Well, the last step is actually going from hex to pent, which is when you go from square root of 2, which is max destructive wave interference, perfect for snowflakes crystallizing, but 0 centripetal force or implosion. So that last visualization actually is, I mean, you can't see it in here very well, but the red, oh, you can't see it very well either, but there's a red tetracube embedded in the dodeca, and the angle of that, you tilt that cube up to rotate and blink 5 times, and the cube becomes pentodeca. That angle, 32 degrees, is the chin angle of the Sphinx. So there you are. You just visualize your body with this giant hex around you, and then you're ready for the climax moment. The chin tilts 32 degrees, just like the Sphinx. and then the cube rotates, blink 5 times, and forms a pentodeca, and you get golden ratio. You get implosion, you get centripetal force. Now, if you're not ready, it is dangerous, okay? Because if you try to implode and you ain't shareable yet, you're not going to have a good death.
Meaning if you
bliss.
haven't, right, if you haven't got your spin right on your energy,
if you haven't sorted your
chakras,
emotions into purely distributable, shareable waves called pure intention, if you got any anger, man, forget that. You ain't ready.
Yeah.
So that's the principle, that when you go from hex to pent, and that pent creates golden ratio, and every XYZ coordinate of every node in the infinite 3D fractal nestodecacosa is a simple integer exponent golden ratio in the Star Mother Kit, goldenmean.info/kit. So, you know, this is the physics of becoming a shareable wave, which is the doorway, the portal into ancestor memory, which is simply DNA been collecting survival info as wave pure principle for 1 billion years.
Wonderful, wonderful information. I've got a few more questions left, so I know we don't have much more time. Tell me, Dan, how would you, if you had a magic wand, how would you like to see this technology, this understanding integrated into normal everyday life, society, amongst us? How would you like to see this unfold to support humanity?
Yeah, whether you call it hygiene for bliss, or the physics of bliss, or the physics of consciousness, or the physics of how you get a soul, or the physics of how you take memory through death, you know, kids really should be interested. It's more interesting than a computer. Hello, the way through death. Ain't that interesting, kids? So, hello, kids. How about getting interested in the physics of how you're going to take a soul through death? It's very electrical. It's very measurable. And by the way, it's the most important decision you're ever going to make. So I would like to see physicsofsoul.com taught to the kids. That is my dream. Yes, absolutely. And by the way, on the day that the kid learns to make alpha in their brainwaves, which flameinmind.com is dedicated to teach, that is a turning point, man. Oh, you embedded in the Schumann. Oh, you got a little clairvoyant. Oh, you had a little bliss. Oh, you started a little clairvoyance. Oh, you started to lucid dream coherently. Oh, you started to have a soul. Hello. Why don't we teach the kids? What else is fun? You know, the Aboriginals were clear. If you cannot teach your kids to have a bliss experience, you ain't got culture. And the Italian church full of people stood up and cheered when I explained that. They got it. It ain't the color of your wine and shoe polish. Hell no. Culture is, can you teach your kid to have a bliss experience? And guess what? In the West right now, we do not have culture.
No. I agree. I agree. So, as someone who is immersed in blissful experience, it seems to me that you are daily, probably since you had your Kundalini
I get to have a
awakening.
little fun. Okay. Hey, it's fun teaching. I'm becoming a shareable wave. I'm
Yeah,
practicing.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, shareable way. Yeah. Do you use your Therapy on yourself or do you not need to?
I had a form of COVID 2 or 3 times.
Did you?
And by golly, yeah, I felt it zap that infection out of my throat a couple of times. It was amazing. And I do have, but actually, to be very honest here, 30 years of Kundalini is
Mm,
way too much bliss.
mm.
Way too much. No, you got a lightning bolt going up your tailbone and lightning coming out of your head. I mean, no, you got to be a little careful. So no, I don't actually use the field. But our
Yes.
neighbors, they're coming running over for all kinds of things. They love it. So really the turning point when your aura is no longer a parasite is when you know your way to your own bliss experience. And Therapy is a great introduction, but I ain't saying everybody's got to spend $30,000. No.
Yes. Yes. It's a great way to introduce someone to the idea of bliss
Right. And if you
and,
want to do
astral hygiene and what that
exactly
feels like
the
to be
first taste of
well
bliss.
and
The first
sovereign. Yeah.
That's why the kids are desperate for sex, drugs, rock and roll, because they
Hmm.
know they're dead in their soul until they can have bliss. They know they're dead in their soul if they don't get bliss. So sex, drugs, and rock and roll was step one. Well, actually, what they were seeking was a
Yeah.
source of bliss.
Yes.
Hello, because they
Yes.
unconsciously know. Remember, medicine measures whether you have an immune system with harmonic inclusiveness in your heart. Harmonic inclusiveness perfected is specifically fractal compression, heart rate variability. So implosion
Mm.
sound is the medically documented solution to the measurement of immune health. So you play this implosion sound in your headphones. You can do it for 20 bucks, flameinmind.com in the sound option, and then you can feed that to all the gadgets. But learning the principle,
Yeah.
essentially what
Yeah.
that means is the more you have bliss, the more you can feel magnetic lines, and then you can go find the place where bliss is possible and exit the metal building and the electrosmog so that your aura can implode.
Wonderful. How did it feel in your throat when you said you felt it, the
Yeah.
COVID
Yeah.
burning? Well, interesting.
Well,
Interesting.
um, there is such a thing as too much bliss. There is such a thing as too much implosion. For example, if
Mm.
somebody does Therapy or even Piezophire too much, there's a bit of a dehydration effect. So
Okay.
implosion is inherently dehydration. What you're burning is hydrogen. You're actually, hydration is charge distribution. It's water. So, there is such a thing as too much. And so, for example, if you're sitting in bliss or Kundalini, you got this lightning going up your tailbone. Daniel Brinkley had a little bit too much lightning. He called it near death. He became a superconductor, and everybody he touched, he saw every peak emotion of their life. His
Right.
DNA was. So, yes, you want to enter bliss slowly and under control so that your aura can grow gradually into a larger and larger field. Eventually, you can see through the heart of the sun like it's an eyeball.
Do you think you would have arrived at Therapy and continued all this amazing work if you hadn't had this bliss experience through Kundalini work some time ago?
Well, it's been many years. Our documentary is goldenmean.info/Kundalini on the biophysics of Kundalini. We know what the powers, the frequency signature power spectra is. So then when we bumped into Antoine Priory documenting healing tens of thousands of cancers here in France, didn't have a clue why. And then I saw that at least 4 to 6 of the key frequencies he used, which he got from Reif and Lakowski,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
happened to fit my equation. That's the moment when we knew how to perfect what Antoine Priory did not finish. That history is in the How Theraphi Works at theraphi.net. Okay, so that was a moment when we knew we can build the ultimate bioactive field. Now we can do this in 1,000 different ways, and we've done it in 5 different ways already. And we got a bunch more cooking, by the way. You can take Piezophire and zap crystals. You can take Piezophire and zap shungite spheres and radiate the space. I mean, we got all kinds of new toys coming out.
Shungite spheres. Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
You sit one of those on the Piezophire vibrator and you radiate and fill the room. And God, does that affect the lucid dreaming? Because you're
Mm.
conditioning space, actually.
Mm. Dan, thank you so much. I've had so much information from you. It's been joyful listening to you, really, and feeling the energy. The whole thing, the sentences sometimes are so loaded and so packed with technical information, but I'm getting it. There's something there that, I'm still able to understand in my very humble way. So thank you for taking the time to explain something that you have to explain day in and day out. And thank you for making this the culmination of your life's experience. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you. And
Thank you. You're
I
kind.
look forward to coming on the retreat in September. I'm super excited about it.
Oh, wonderful. And the obvious pure intention of your wish to make this shareable honors me. And I should be inspired by your pure intention, actually. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah.
Blessing.